So our next guest is Rabbi Nachum Eisenstein. This is actually a continuation of an interview that we had with him that we did not get a chance to play. And he's going to speak about reporting molesters to the police. So let's go back to our interview. What is your opinion about the in America there's been a lot to do about molestation. Does somebody go to the police or do they go to a Rav? And Reb David Cohen has been very outspoken. He says he's seen many cases. I had a boy buy my house where the boy committed suicide. He was molested, and a year later he committed suicide. And he spoke about it by the Shabbos table rather unemotionally. The next year I heard he overdosed and he died. And he says the Rabbanim don't have a clue as to the damage. So, they come out by the Agudah and they say, we're going to make a Bezdin of Rabbanim. Well, it's years later. It doesn't exist. So it's like there's a fire burning and they're saying, well, Ganu, you should go ask. There's going to be a Bezdin. I mean, if somebody's dying, that's not the attitude you take. So David Cohen says it's Pikuach Nefesh. These people are roidfim. They never do one. They're repeat offenders. Right? He said nobody eats one potato chip. These people, then there's no such a thing as a molester who does it once. He says, it's true, you pick up the phone, you call the police, and he says they should be put in jail for life because they're recidivists. What's your opinion about that?
So, first of all, there's a written tshuva from Rabbi Yosef written to the Grain Rafael Cohen.
I saw the tshuva. I'm familiar with the tshuva.
And I have tshuva, you should know, the tshuva is being misquoted.
Well, I saw the tshuva b'ksav. I didn't see a quote. I saw the tshuva, and he quotes it on the Rajba. He quotes the Rajba in Shin Peches, but which
the people are misquoting the tshuva, and besides the tshuva, I had the source of hearing firsthand from Rabbi Yosef. Unfortunately, this issue came up not once and not twice. Rabbi Yosef holds that there has to be a very strong umdana to accuse a person, like you say, to put him in jail for the rest of his life, unless you know 100% that there's an umdana. There has to be an umdana in the muchach, not just a reglayim ladover. There has to be an umdana in the muchach that there's basis. Otherwise, we know there's cases of unfortunate cases that people went to jail, and found out afterwards that the whole thing was a mistake. So we're dealing with a very delicate issue.
Let me respond. I spoke to a very prominent doctor who deals with this, and he says, contrary to popular opinion, when somebody goes to the authority, they're, for the most part, disinterested, and unless the police find strong evidence, they're not even interested in taking the case because they're lazy. So it's not like somebody says, I heard a rumor, you go to the police and a SWAT team comes down and arrests the person. He says, you go to the police, if you're lucky, you'll get them interested. If they're interested, they launch an investigation. If they find strong evidence, they'll arrest the person. So he said the entire concept that there's, like in the movies, a SWAT team waiting for a phone call, let's go attack the person. He said it's a myth, it's not true.
Okay, assuming what this person's saying is true.
This is Dr. Wurzberger, a prominent doctor.
I can't argue with him because I really don't have any first-hand information. But let me just comment on one of the things you just said. That if the police, the police get involved, let's say for everything they got involved, and the police feel that there's a strong case, then they'll deal with it and put the person in jail. Who are the police to decide whether there's a strong case?
Who should decide? But who should decide?
The police have the nemanis to fulfill what the requirement of Rabbi Yosef. There should be an umdin in the muchach.
Who should
decide? The police see a Jew. When the police see a Jew coming and they can have a chance, you know better than me. You're living in America when they can cop a Jew and put him in jail.
There's no Nachum, there's no racism. There's no anti-Semitism in these matters. They don't look at it in that regard here. It's very apolitical.
I hope what you're saying is true, but again, there was a basin set up. There was a basin set up and I was in a basin set up in the East Coast by Choshev Rabbana. I was even asked to join the basin for certain cases, a few cases I was involved with, and reluctantly I accepted to do it under certain conditions. However, the accusers refused to come to the basin. They refused to come to the basin. They refused to cooperate. If the basin would have decided that there's reglaim ladover. More than reglaim, there's umdin and amuchach according to the requirements of Rabbi Yosef. Then the base.
His lashon is reglaim ladover in his tshuva.
Yeah, I know, but he meant more. He told me it has to be umdin and amuchach. It's not just, and again.
I mean, did Rabbi Yashiv Neman Ktanim would be Neman or no?
Very problematic. Very problematic.
But you have a Shoyal Umeshiv who says Ktanim are Neman. The Ramah says that Ktanim are Neman, and it only happens to Ktanim for the most part. So if Ktanim aren't Neman, what chance do we have?
I did not say that Ktanim are not Neman. I said it's problematic. There has to be a chakir in the drisha, and it has to be done by Nemanim, and afterwards there should be mechoshev, experienced rabbanim who know how to deal with this situation.
But Reb Nachum, I want to ask you, why are you being machmir on the life of the Roidif? Why aren't we looking out to be machmir on the Hatzalah of the Nirdaf, knowing a few facts? One, 99% of these cases, children don't accuse adults of molesting them. It's just foreign, and psychologists will tell you, a child does not come to his father and say, so-and-so did that to me, my Rebbe. It's just strange. A child doesn't do that. So in the vast majority, it's true. The vast majority of molesters have multiple cases. I mean, this fellow Mondrowitz I personally know, had hundreds of children he molested. Why aren't we being machmir? They came to Reb Chaim and they said, why are you so mekil in Hilchos Shabbos? He said, I'm not being mekil in Hilchos Shabbos, I'm being machmir on Pikuach Nefesh. Why are we not being machmir?
It was Gabba Yom Kippur.
Okay, but why aren't we being machmir, knowing that it's the Pikuach Nefesh and the children very often commit suicide? And we have people like Yankee Horowitz who says 75% of kids who go off the derech is because they were molested. And he's an expert in this. 75. Why aren't we being machmir on the children's lives? Why are we being machmir on the muchach, on the thing?
There's a din of maichozis.
Well, that's what the police are for. Let the police investigate.
Again, I don't know if the Chreidische community has to give over to the police. And that every court case, you go to court in America, and I don't know if Israel's any better. It's like going to Las Vegas.
Now we're going to interview Rabbi Zvi Gluck, who, as director of Amudim, has the most hands-on experience of anybody in the United States with Orthodox children who've experienced some type of abuse. We have on the phone with us from Brooklyn, New York, one of the great young Askanim of our generation, the founder of Amudim, Reb Zvi Gluck. Welcome, Reb Zvi.
Shalom Aleichem. How are you, Reb David?
Baruch Hashem. Could you tell us, what does Amudim do?
That's the magic question. Amudim does crisis intervention and case management in situations where people really have nowhere to turn. We have a primary focus on helping victims of sexual abuse and those suffering from addiction, as well as have other services that we help people with as well.
And start at the beginning. How did you get how did Amudim come about?
So this really goes back to when I was 19 years old, and two of my close friends passed away. One of them committed suicide, and one overdosed on drugs. And at that point, I started getting involved, as an individual, helping people. Obviously, being my father's son meant I was born into this business, Baruch Hashem. And after many years of doing things ad hoc, about a little bit over a year and a half ago, two close friends, Moshe Wolfson and Mendy Klein, sat me down and said, it's time to do something more formally. This business of just running around is not conducive to what we're trying to accomplish in Klal Yisrael. And they basically pushed me against the wall to start Amudim.
And so tell me, how did you start it? What does it do? What are its systems that you have in place? How many employees? Give us make it three-dimensional.
Okay, fine. So how it started was initially with 3 people, really just finding a way to manage cases of kids at risk, victims of abuse, and drug addicts and alcoholics. From there, we expanded. We currently have a full-time staff of 9, 5 of which are case managers. And what we do is we provide this everything but the direct service for victims, addicts, and families. So just to make it simply stated, if somebody comes to us that unfortunately their child was molested, so we will help them find an appropriate therapist to deal with the child. We will help the family find therapists to deal with them. Our case managers will be involved with them every step of the way. When there's law enforcement involved, we're going to help them communicate and do things in a very simple fashion where the victims don't have to relive the trauma of going over the abuse time and time again. If they then require specialty inpatient treatment, we'll help them find the appropriate program for that. So we'll really be there from when the person realizes that they need help and do a holistic approach to help the entire family get through this traumatic episode so that they can heal appropriately.
So let me ask you a few questions. We've had differing Rabbanim. There was the letter signed by 100 Rabbanim. Reb David Cohen called it the Hetemei Rabbanim, allowing people to go directly to the police. And then we were going to have one after you, Rabbi Nachum Eisenstein from Eretz Yisrael, who says that it's usher to go to the police. And we had Reb Daniel Neustadt, who was sort of someplace in the middle. He was concerned about that the letter did not seem to have many guidelines, but it seemed to be a carte blanche.
So
I'm not asking you a halachic opinion, but experientially, how damaging is child molestation? Do you agree with these Rabbanim? Not on a halachic basis, but just from a life experience basis. What, in your opinion, what has been your experience in dealing with these cases?
I mean, I'll answer it with a small metaphor. As a paramedic in Hatzalah, I drive on Shabbos for what we call Safek B'Kuach Nefesh, right?
Right.
Klal Yisrael that I know of, personally, Zvi Gluck that Amudim has dealt with, has unfortunately 41 tragic deaths under the age of 30 since this past Rosh Hashanah, of which 17 of them we know for a fact were victims of sexual abuse.
So when you say deaths, were these suicides, murders? Like, what does that mean, 17 deaths?
Suicides and drug overdoses.
Of 17 children since Rosh Hashanah, and now we're in Tu B'Shvat, right? So it's
right.
So it's around 6 months or so, right? 5 months. 17 suicides in 5 months because of sexual abuse.
That I know of. So to answer your question is, I'm not a Rav. I don't paskin. But if somebody steals money from somebody else, people have no problem running and saying, go to the police. But this is murder.
17 deaths in
17
5 months, suicides? And how large of a community do you deal with?
So, I mean, on a regular basis, I would say about 30 to 40% of the people coming to us for help are from the New York metro area, and the rest of it are now spread out throughout the country, and even Eretz Yisrael, Switzerland, England. I mean, we're getting calls from all over.
Now, I'm curious, is that number of suicide deaths because of, is that something endemic to the Orthodox community, to the Haredim, because there's such a stigma attached, or is that sort of indicative of the general population?
The answer is, I don't know as far as the suicide rates, but the chief medical examiner of New York had asked me a while ago, how can they try to explain that every time that someone Jewish dies young, the family wants them to write aneurysm on the death certificate? When they do statistics, how is it possible that so many people in a small community all have aneurysms? So, the answer is statistics are statistics that are never real because it's hard to answer. Sexual abuse, we know, affects all the communities equally.
Now, is it split between men and boys and girls equally?
I mean, what we're seeing is different than what the national statistics are, but the answer is yeah. I mean, we're dealing with boys that are being molested, girls being molested. On the suicides, it's pretty much, I think it might be 1 or 2 more boys than girls, but it's pretty much the same. The numbers are.
So when Reb David Cohen said that they have a din of a roidif, you would say that the statistics certainly seem to support his opinion.
They support his opinion 100%, and I would even say that even those that are alive, that aren't dead, are dead inside until they get help. So there's so, I mean, dealing with victims of abuse and trying to get them to heal is the most difficult part of what we deal with, because literally we have people that are 35, 40 years old that are completely empty and dead from what happened to them when they were 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Now, is this because, and I know you're not a psychologist, but is this because in our community, Kedusha and Tahara and Sneas are so accentuated, and is there perhaps more damage because of that, or is this just a human condition?
So it's funny, I actually discussed this exact question with David Pelkowitz many times. We don't believe so. We believe that it's just something that's really, it's a problem everywhere. However, we do find it, the one area that we are having a big issue with, especially now that there are organizations doing awareness and programming, and I must bring this up, is that everybody's always talking about the rabbi, the bus driver, the coach that's the molester. Unfortunately, over 90% of the cases that we deal with occur in the person's own home. So while we're so busy with awareness and programming, we're forgetting that most of the people that this is happening to, we're not really reaching out to and trying to get them the help that they need.
So why aren't Rabbanim speaking more about this?
Well, unfortunately, the one that has been batting for our side for a long time left us this week. I don't know. I wish we had more. It's a good question.
Wow.
It's a very good question. I mean, I'm sure you knew Rabbi Ronnie Greenwald.
Peripherally.
So he was one of the first people that came out publicly on this topic and went up against everybody.
Are you seeing attitudes changing among Rabbanim?
100%, but in a very, very interesting way. Whereas 5 years ago, Rabbanim would close their eyes and, as if it didn't happen, they're already starting to have the conversation. They're still not where they need to be, but I can say that we're light years ahead of where we were when I first started getting involved in abuse issues, but we still have a long, long way to go. But there's definitely a change of attitude and acceptance that these problems really exist.
Now, Reb David Cohn was, in my opinion, when he spoke, he said the Rabbanim who don't paskin this way are not aware, they're ignorant, they don't understand the damage, they don't understand the trauma, nor do they understand the life-threatening situations it creates. So he was really on the forefront of this.
I mean, not only that, but I use it as an educational message. There are many times that we have people come to us with cases, and we're starting to help them, and the family says, oh, our Rav doesn't want us to do A, B, C, and D. So we'll take that as an opportunity to sit with those Rabbanim and bring in a detective and a therapist and someone from the DA's office and slowly but surely educate the Rabbanim for them to realize, A, what the damage is psychologically, B, what the legal process really is. I mean, it's just not simply true that anyone can go to anyone and say, you did this, and have them arrested and destroy their life.
So talk about that, because you're going to have Rabbi Eisenstein in a few minutes get on the phone and speak about anybody could destroy anybody's life, and that the police are all vicious anti-Semites, and they're looking for the opportunity to hang a Jew by his toenails. Could you talk about that a little?
It couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, I am a chaplain with a few police departments. I'm a liaison here locally in New York City. I deal with the prison system. It's just not true. I mean, it's nice to say that because people like to make martyrs out of the few big-name cases. I can speak specifically about abuse because that's the topic we're talking about. When a victim comes forward and says something happened to them, and let's assume it's in therapy where the therapist is a mandated reporter, and the therapist reports it, the detectives that come to interview this victim are not from the local police station. These are specialized detectives from a unit. If the child is under a certain age, the child abuse squad. If they're over a certain age, they call it sexual victim, the sex crimes unit, depending on which city or county you're in, or special victims unit. They don't want to stigmatize young kids. And these detectives are investigators. They do forensic investigations. They have lines of questioning, and they know what they're looking for. And they know how difficult it is to really deal with this, and they know how to feel through what could be real, what can't be real, and even more so, even if something is real, will the victim be believable enough that an arrest should even be warranted? Because maybe if you make the arrest and then the victim doesn't come through, it's going to fall apart anyway. Then this goes to if they do feel there's enough information, it goes to the district attorney's office. Again, this is an investigative process. And the district attorney's office has both psychologists and the ADAs that are assigned to sex crimes are, again, specially trained, both in being lawyers, of course, and in being forensic investigators to know what to ask and to really go through it tooth and nail. They told me a staggering number. Less than 15% of all reported cases of sexual abuse actually lead to an arrest.
Less than 15%.
Less than 15%
of reports actually lead to an arrest. That's a staggering number.
That's crazy. And of that, on the national level, less than 10% of that 15 actually lead to a conviction.
So 10 out of 15 means you're talking about really 1.5% of all cases reported lead to a conviction?
Correct.
That's a frighteningly low number.
But remember that most of these cases occur in the home, and family members won't report on family members. And if you're in a small minority community, and let's say it's a clergy member or a teacher, I can tell you cases that will make your hair stand up. I don't know how far I can go with this, but I said this story publicly a few years ago. A 13-and-a-half-year-old boy was actually molested in a mikveh in a prominent shul. And I found out about this about a year and a half, 2 years later. The boy was learning in Eretz Yisrael at that point, ran away, was already on the road to be not from. Long story short, I had reached out to the Rav because I found out that the Rav made this boy apologize to the older fellow that molested him. And I went to the Rav and I said, "What's wrong with you?" And he says, "What do you mean? If the boy thinks he did something wrong, then he'll never go to the police. So we needed him to apologize so this younger man shouldn't go to jail."
It's sick.
It's
the hepech of everything Torah. It's like the hepech of Yashar. It's the hepech of Emes. It's the hepech of justice. It's the opposite of everything we're taught from Kita Aleph and on. It's the hepech of the ganze Torah. This Rav should be defracked. They should give him a job in the sanitation department.
Nah, even that's too bakavitik. At least they do a good job.
So are there any particular Rabbanim that, quote unquote, are particularly unsensitive or sort of lead the charge against, Hayashar v'Hatoiv, Arayas in our community? They read the Parsha of Arayas on Yom Kippur by Mincha. There's no stronger statement of this from our Gedolim, from our Nevi'im, right? It's Mitama Nevi'im. Are there Rabbanim who are against it? Are there Rabbanim who are against what we're taught? Are there Kaifrim in the Torah? Do you have Rabbanim like that?
So again, it's hard to the answer is I'm sure there are, but the way they view it is they come out with these great terutzim. So at the end of the day, Reb Noach Isaac Olbaum said it best. We spoke at an event together. And he gets up and he says, "I personally believe everybody should go to the police. But because I know that people are going to want to go to a Rav so that they can look good in their community's eyes, I'll tell you go to a Rav. But I'm going to add to that. If the Rav doesn't paskin go to the police, this is pekuach nefashis. You go to another Rav and another Rav and another Rav till you find the Rav that says you can go." On a case-by-case basis, the Rabbanim always will tell you the same thing, and this is what they tell us and my staff on a regular basis. Of course, if it's really true, then the person should go, but how do we know it's true? You can destroy a guy's life over a false accusation, and you're taking a chance. And when I try to explain to these Rabbanim that these young children, especially children below a certain age, they don't know to make this stuff up. This is not like a kid who's, saying, "I want to get back at you," and you have proof. People don't lie about being abuse victims. It's such a emotionally terrifying and traumatic thing that it's not something they lie about. And I tell it to these Rabbanim, and we have, whether it's David Pelkowitz or Barry Horowitz or Dr. Zimmerman or any of the doctors, or when you hear David Mendel speak, everybody involved in this field says the same thing. And the Rabbanim, I don't know. Listen, we're hoping we're going to see change faster than we are. We're just not there yet.
Do you find in any particular community less embrace towards the reality of what they go through?
So I would say I'm going to use this word. I have to say this. I'm saying this l'tayelis. This is not, I'm called a self-hating Jew often enough. I'm used to it already. But in the ultra-Orthodox and in the Hasidic communities, where things are very tight-knit and, focused around the figurehead and around a certain culture of support, we'll call it, we have the most difficult times breaking through to deal with these issues. And we're trying. We are trying. I sat with a Hasidic Rebbe this past week, and over a case. We were discussing a case, and he looks at me and he goes, I know this is a big problem. We don't have a good solution. And I looked at him, I said, again, I'm not a Paisik, but if a person is doing this, shouldn't they be arrested? Shouldn't they at the very least be made Medea? People can protect themselves. Something, if a guy walks into a school with a loaded gun, nobody would think twice about killing the person. But here we're talking about...
It's an issue of Loisamed al Damriyacha. Mamish an issue of Loisamed al Damriyacha. Thank you so much, Reb Zvi.